Changemaker Forum. This is a super fun part of our session where rather than me just sharing waves, we see what happens when people actually start following those waves. So I'm going to share with you the people I'm going to invite on stage here. Then they're all going to come up together, and we're going to spend about an hour just having a conversation. You're going to have a chance to ask questions as well, right? Because this is about what happens when you start actually following these waves. We're going to have come up fairly soon Max Telford, who runs a company called Maxtel Software. And Maxtel Software is a company, so interesting. When I met Max, he was sitting in your seat a year ago. The first time I came to New Zealand for the Fast Forward, he came up and he shared how his company was having challenges because it was an accounting company that happened to have the contract to do the accounts for McDonald's here in New Zealand. But then what happened was the corporate office in America decided to change policy, and he got it all taken away for them to do centrally. He came on board. I've been mentoring him for a year, and he went from basically a situation where he was kind of like struggling to figure out what he's going to do next to then reclaiming the franchisees one by one within McDonald's until he got to a point where about 6 months ago, he got all the franchisees coming back on board, and now he's just got too much business coming his way. So he's kind of like figuring out how do you actually start scaling up his company and building it off the back of what he's done with his accounting company as well. So what's going on in franchising, what's going on in terms of serving companies, he's going to be someone who's going to be sharing his story. We have got both Beryl Oldham and Rustika Lamb. You saw Rustika earlier. They had, when I first met Rustika, she had been on some of these same programs that some of you have been on investing in property. It was through a period in New Zealand when the property had gone right up and then right down. And she's like, well, that's not working for me right now. And talking about the levels we're going to go through this afternoon, she was at an infrared level, which was at like negative cash flow within her household. It's like, what am I going to do differently? And we got really zoomed in, and I've been mentoring her for several years now. We got really zoomed in terms of what her real passion was, what she could do with her supporter profile. And as a result of that, she got involved in Bloom Training, which now is the leading recruitment company for learning and development here in New Zealand. And between her and Beryl, they have just created an incredible business. They created and then now run eLearns, which is like the #1 convention here in New Zealand for the learning and development community. They were the first to bring in the Google Glass virtual reality goggles that could then be used by learning and development professionals here as well. And again, the success continues. But what's so interesting is the ups and downs that happens when you actually start getting involved in a new industry like that. So we're going to hear from Beryl and from Rustika on their story as well. We've got Colart Miles, who's going to be coming up, who very similar to Beryl and Rustika and Max, provides services to companies as well, but he's providing them from an innovation point of view. So you're going to hear how he does that, and you saw what I saw earlier, the slide around how innovation is now getting systematized, what that actually means, and his experience comes from all around the world. He's a great guy, coming originally from Africa, so you're going to hear about his experiences. And then finally, we have Dane DC Cordova, my very first personal development course I ever went on. I think I got there by accident. I wandered into this room in Singapore when I was like back in 2007 trying to get my business started in Singapore, and she was running a company, she runs a company still, which was running an event called Money and You. And I ended up going to Money and You. I learned a whole bunch of new things about business, which I hadn't known before. And I was like, you can teach this stuff. And it was from there I went on a journey which has led me to where I am today. And it just happened by pure synchronicity that she was going to be here in New Zealand the same time that I was as well. We're both part of something called the Transformational Leadership Council, which was set up by Jack Hanfield and John Gray, and basically is like leaders, transformation leaders from around the world. So I met her there several years ago after a gap of some time. And then it just so happened that we're both here together. So for her to be able to share her story and all the ups and downs that happen within transformational leadership and the things she's now doing, not just within that field, but also within sustainability, within China and this region, is super exciting. So we have a diverse range of change makers who are going to be joining us on stage right now. Can you please put your hands together and give them all a big round of applause? Hiya, hiya.
It was 1997.
97, what did I say? 2007? I was 10 years out.
Hi.
Hiya, hiya.
Hi. Good, thanks.
Hi, girl. Hi, find a seat. Boy, girl, boy, girl. Call out.
Hugging as well.
Come on,
then bring it in, brother.
Grab a seat. Okay. So, I'm going to start by just asking a few different questions, and then we'll just kind of get the ball rolling from there. I'm going to start with you, Max, and I would love to ask a question, not so much about your current success in what you're doing, but that point where things were going great for you, and then along comes McDonald's and says, oh, actually, we're not going to be continuing the way we are. Because at that point, that was, this is going to be a conversation around what do you do at times when you weren't expecting it to happen. So when that happened, obviously you weren't expecting it. What went through your mind? What was your thought process, and how did you get through what would have been a bit of a shocker at the time to then get back and get going again?
Thank you, Roger. Yeah, it was a hell of a shock at the time. It's amazing what one person is in a senior position can make for a direction for a whole country. And we'd had great relationships with individual franchisees, but then one corporate decision goes against, and then suddenly, whoa. So we'd had a contract with corporate as well, and they pulled that, and then they started mandating the franchisees to start using their software. And it was like, oh, what the hell can we do about this? And went through a whole range of things between, okay, well, we've still got the client, we're still doing some business with them, it just reduced, it didn't disappear completely with most of the franchisees. And it was like, well, what do we do? Do we fight this? Do we hang around? Do we move to a different position? What did I have to do to ensure the company survived? So that was a big part for, we had to downsize our team to about half what it was. We ended up diversifying into different market segments, trying different things. And we experimented heaps, and it was a real strange feeling though, because we seemed to go sideways for almost a decade, where our turnover stayed about the same, but where we got the money from kept changing, and it was one of those scary things where you don't know quite what to do. So it was.
Now, what's really interesting about the whole shift to then go exponential, right? Is there's a lot of different functions like accounts, which is the same as something like training. The things that a lot of companies, as they go into winter period, they become commodities. It's kind of like, I'll go for the cheapest to get an accountant and so on. And I know when our first conversation a year ago was talking about what real value you bring, which would make the people you're doing business with want to work with you as opposed to anyone else. And you were telling me about the service you provide isn't just the accounts, right? You actually are able to provide a better service, which is why they wanted to keep working with you, better service to them specifically for what they needed than any other accountant. So can you just share with everyone that distinction about how you were value adding in a way that they as customers, and we're talking about the actual franchisees as opposed to the franchisor, like why they kept on kind of like banging on corporate's door to say we want to do more with Max?
I'm very grateful for the franchisees. They're a small business owner and I can relate to them, whereas the corporate, they seem to operate different rules. And the biggie for me was I even got more clarity last year at Bali, where the sort of the essence of what we do is predictable franchise profits. And it was that whole thing about predictability, because the franchisees wanted to know what their, e.g. what their P&L, what their costs were, but they wanted to know it in a time that they could actually do something about it. And they wanted to see how it integrated back to what they could actually do something about. So we do full payroll as well. So it's no good just seeing a labour percent. They want to see, okay, well, where did it happen? Which week? What day? Tell me as it's happening. Even tell me on the time clock if I've got changes happening to my sales and who's clocked on or not, as in should I do something? Call in extra people, offer people to go home. It's this thing of how do you give them the tools to be able to see what's happening? And it's because we gave franchisees the ability to have more control over what they could see in their business, that they really hated it when they were forced to use a different tool, because they suddenly lost this control. They'd lose another % or 2 of their bottom line, and they felt powerless being able to do anything about it. So it was their loyalty and that ability that suddenly thought, okay, that's where we add the value, let's focus on that.
Awesome, very cool. So, okay, Rastika, I'm going to come over to you on your shift into getting involved with Bloom and also into learning and development. What was that? Because I know we had the whole conversation at the time, but that whole point where you said, I'm not going to put the center of what I'm doing a money-making activity like property investment, but I'm going to make it the center of what I actually really, really care about. What was that shift you went through? And at the very beginning bit, before the business was even necessarily there, how you actually then linked in with the whole recruitment side to make that happen?
Mm-hmm. Well, as you said, the property market went pretty pear-shaped, and after having built a millions of dollar portfolio, lost it all. So I went contracting because that was my background in learning and development. So I was an instructional designer, so I wrote training material for corporates. And I just got tired of recruiters ringing me as a supporter profile who has a big network. Are you available? No. Who do you know? Oh, ring them. They'd run off and make the money, and I just got sick of that happening. That was the first thing. And the second thing is I saw the poor quality of learning and development as I went around very big companies in New Zealand, and I thought, I have to do something about that. So I approached several people that might be able to set up with me, because I thought, being a supporter, I probably shouldn't set my own business up. So I went and found someone who had a complementary recruitment business, and we set up business together.
And I remember at the time, there was a real challenge, because I was saying, you've got to do the Clark Kent time before you can be Superman, so make sure you're earning money before you just kind of go and start your own thing up. And at that point, he was already saying to you, come work with me, because I know you'd be great at recruiting. And you're like, well, what is recruiting going to do with learning and development? And we had the conversation to say, well, why don't you do both? Where you say to him, right, we'll set up using your brand for recruiting, but I want to do it specifically for learning and development, which meant that you could then actually start building your own reputation in the industry as someone who actually got to know everyone with the industry. And then when you did that, that whole link to then actually create the workshops, create the solutions, how's that now led to the branding you now have, or the reputation you now have in New Zealand?
Well, I think eLearns helped enormously. One of the first things we did, so we set up in 2012, and we set up a conference called eLearns, because there was no e-learning conference in New Zealand, but we just leveraged everyone else's expertise. And I think the first year, how much did we make? About $600 or something.
Yeah, something like that.
We didn't lose money.
A lot of fun.
Yeah. But that really sort of sealed out. We had platinum sponsors, and we brought speakers in from overseas, and we pretty much broke even. And then we ran it again in 2015 and made about 38,000. So as our reputation built, because we've always been focused on how we can add value to the industry, and that was one way we could add value.
Very cool. And the very first time you ran it, you actually brought in some expert speakers from overseas.
Yeah. 3, UK. And we also had the leaders of the industry, in particular the e-learning industry, that we charged them $10,000 to be our sponsor, so we just borrowed everyone's credibility, basically.
So this is the difference of building your reputation by climbing the mountain as opposed to just parachuting in, right? When you actually are linking to others in the industry, which is what you did, creating eLearns, then you could actually invite everyone along as opposed to them seeing you as just a competitor in the industry, invite the top people that they would want to see, invite the top sponsors who would want to be part of it. So you're actually parachuting on everyone else's brand, because trust is number one thing, and you're in a position where you're just getting started. It's like, well, no one trusts me yet, but you create a forum where everyone who is trusted becomes part of it, and then you borrow that trust until you earn it yourself as well, right? Now I'm going to come up to Beryl for a moment.
I'll just share one more thing.
Yeah.
So this year we've got eLearns eLab happening as well, and I put it in the newsletter once last month, and we've actually already got sales. We haven't said who the speakers are or whatever, but people are actually signing up already.
Right.
So it's a good sign for this year.
Yeah, totally. So that slide I was sharing earlier about the difference of someone who's a casual who's just trying something once compared to when they become a loyal fan, which means it's like people queuing up for Apple products that they don't even know how it works yet, but they're now actually buying because of what you stand for and what they know to trust you as a company, as opposed to trusting a particular product, right? Which is awesome. Like Max is a mechanic profile, and Rustika is a supporter profile, and Beryl's an accumulator profile. So you guys have actually learned also how to work effectively together. And Beryl, do you want to just share from your point of view as you guys started really turning your business from kind of like going from yellow level, which we'll talk about more this afternoon, to green level, how that's changed in terms of the performance of the company as well?
Yeah, it's quite interesting. I was quite happy at yellow level, and I think secretly I'd like to be yellow, but I have to work with more people now, thanks to Rustika. But yeah, it's quite interesting actually. The changes to the business was basically we started to get too busy for the two of us to be able to keep up with what we created. So obviously we had to bring some people on board, and we've got some of our excellent team here today, our sourcing team, Nicola and Nick. And they joined us probably first, didn't they? And they're doing sourcing for us out of Cambridge. So basically, we've got a huge database of contractors. But if we are looking for people, they're our go-to people, and they'll look through the database. And if there's something that we haven't got, then they'll go looking externally for us as well. And the model works quite well. So then we were starting to build a team around us, and then we've picked up a few other people as well. We've got 4 Nicolas in our organisation. I can't understand what it is. But the good news is there's another accumulator now. Thank goodness, because everybody else was a supporter. So I had all these supporters around me and just me. And I guess, it's been a struggle. Like, I didn't know really how to be an entrepreneur. I never thought of myself as an entrepreneur. I just knew that I got tired of all the corporate stuff that goes on, and I wanted to try working for myself. And Rustika and I had met each other a few times over the years. And it just kind of worked, because I needed her to sort of show me how to get out there more. And she needed me to do some of the back end stuff for her. So it was kind of, it worked really well.
Clean up my messes.
Yeah, I clean up her messes. I try. Yeah, and of course, with the whole team of supporters, it was there were so many messes. But anyway, it's okay. So it's been a real change for me. Like, I joined the business about a year, just over a year after Rustique had been going, I think. So it's 2013. So it's nearly 2 years I've been there now, and it's been a real roller coaster ride. And every day I wake up not knowing quite what's going to happen, but we're having a lot of fun. And I think the main thing that I've learned from this is what Roger talks about, partnerships. You've got to get strategic partners. You've got to find other people that are doing stuff really well and collaborate with those people. And that way you will grow a lot faster. You can't do everything yourself.
Very cool. All right. So Carla, I'm going to come over to you now, because, like, as your startup, it's very natural to get into innovation and create new things. And you've gone down a route where you're helping larger companies on the whole innovation route. Given the way that the world is changing at the moment, what for you has been the biggest challenge you've seen with the larger companies to kind of like adjust to it?
Oh, that's a great question. Okay, so a lot of the work that I do had a few assumptions built in, and I loved how you guys mentioned that a little bit earlier on. I just stepped into the end of one of the workshops, but something that was mentioned is, we're often operating off these assumptions, and sometimes they go untested for a while, and you can drift away and out of sync with where you are. And I think that was one of the operating assumptions we had, was size matters. That perhaps smaller companies are a bit more nimble, a little bit more, we might call them neuroplasticities there, so they're elastic in the way they think, a little bit more stretchy, you can do different things. And actually we were confounded, and I'm kind of getting to the point there, we actually found that size didn't really matter, it was mindset that matters. So that's the thing we're sort of coming up against now, that I'm seeing a collaborative servant leadership. These are all characteristics of a growth mindset, I think, becoming more and more important. And when we encounter a fixed mindset, the one that wants to protect value and hold on to it, then I think that becomes a bit of a challenge. And the reality that I think is dawning on a lot of us, and I hope that's one of the things that sort of collected us together, is that there's kind of been a meteorite hit. The planet's been struck by something, and the rules have all changed, and survival of the fittest, the fitness characteristics have changed. So you better learn quick, And I think that's one of the parts of the role that I think my business plays, is to help that realization turn into a response, a systematic, methodical. Sometimes, half the times it's cultural. It actually, I kind of come at it at a cultural fit. And then that gives rise to systems, processes, different ways of doing things. But generally, it tends to come back to the mindset patterns that are there already.
I mean, there's like big companies now like Google and like Facebook and like Apple, which are huge companies, but they're still nimble, and because they've actually got a mindset that has that they started with, that they've managed to build into the culture, and then that's allowed them to grow as well. Absolutely. And what's so interesting is, whereas there was this kind of traditional thought, which is that you have large companies which are going to be slow and dinosaurs, and then you're going to have kind of like small nimble companies. The opposite's now happening, where you have some large nimble companies, and you have some small companies working like dinosaurs.
It's
so
speed that matters,
yeah,
isn't it?
That's right. So for those, what would you say is your experience for those even who might just be 2-3 man bands who are just realizing, holy cow, we're looking to internally and we're not actually learning enough? What would be a couple of things that you're doing with larger companies that they could learn from?
Sure, I think, so I'll answer it with just a little short snippet. What I tend to do is I have a lot of involvement in the startup community around Auckland, around New Zealand, and connected to the global presence with Startup Weekend and a few other groups. And what we've done is sort of taken some of the patterns of thinking there and helped to present them and make them available for corporates and sort of larger entities. And there is this whole spectrum of companies in between. So I guess to try and answer that, we've got the smaller businesses that want to innovate. Be aware that I think the playing field has sort of leveled a little bit. That size doesn't matter, but it's your ability to learn and adapt, I think, that matters. We're seeing the rise of what we might call exponential organizations, which is probably a theme that you guys have touched on.
Yep.
This is the idea that very few people with the right model and mindset and customer experience can yield incredibly large-scale results. So I heard Ray Kurzweil a quote from him a little while back where he said, if you want to make $1 billion, solve a problem for 1 billion people, And that already stuck with me, and I think that would be the advice for the smaller outfits is, be prepared to reinvent, I think. Understand that there's a lot of opportunity in the cracks, but there's also a lot of opportunity in reframing where you are, which from what I gather in this expo is a lot of these tools are there to help you reframe
That's right.
where you are.
Yeah, that was a large part of this morning when we were sharing about that. And one of the things I said, which I'll say in a different way after what you shared, which is that, focus at your mission.
Beyond purpose.
At the end of the day, one of the biggest assets you have to trade with is the dream and mission of what you're going for. Because if you want to actually work with the most talented people in the world, they're not just going for where the money is, they're going for what's most meaningful for what they can do and what actually they're going to be part of. And they're always going to go, if they've got a choice of working with a small company that's doing a small thing compared to a small company doing a big thing, they'll always go for that other one because that's going to be more meaningful for them as well. So it's far easier to attract the best in the world once you actually choose a bigger mission you're going for as well, right? So with that being said, let's come over to DC because that's a large part of what you've seen DC as well in terms of like going for bigger missions. I'm going to start with that side and then kind of work backwards. Could you share with everyone what, after the many years you've had within personal development and seeing the whole growth through it, has been your endpoint now as to what you have as your big mission that you're focusing on?
Well, hi everyone. I just want to say I'm always so honored to be in New Zealand, and what a beautiful land and beautiful peeps. What I have seen in nearly 40 years of being in personal development and having been there when the financial literacy industry was created, what is called transformational leadership, it's that everything that you have been sharing this morning is so correct. And the biggest thing is that there is a big lie out there, which is that the world looks like a certain way, but it isn't at all. And so what we need to do is not only to be in rooms like this, but there's only like 5 industries that are really coming up that you can say yes, you can say to your children, go there. And one of them, of course, is renewables. And that there's a whole conversation in there. I mean, you talk about a niche in the world is to really know that the world is going green. And I was at the UN Climate Change meeting in Paris, and I had the opportunity to sit with the world's leading renewable energy funder of Citibank. And he was recruited 10 years ago by Citibank, and he has been into renewables for 30 years. And so you can see when a big bank gets interested in an area like that it is really important for you to begin to take a note of that. And then also for us to know that the minute that we say, I know, that we close down our consciousness. And so I was just telling Roger, which of course I have to tell you, I get very emotional seeing Roger 20 years later. He actually did Money and You in 1996, 1997 in Singapore, and we had a beautiful dinner with him and his wife, and your children were little. And Roger, you have always been what we call a futurist, like Buckminster Fuller. And so he was really seen at Money and You, he really discovered these aspects of himself, and then to see this work. So this is, for me, my leverage. Robert Kiyosaki of Rich Dad Poor Dad was my business partner for 9 years. Tony Robbins, we trained when he was 23. So this is all my leverage. This is my niche. I churn out social entrepreneurs that find themselves. So what I really look for, what I really recommend to you, for you to really be willing to see and look into areas and in places within yourself and in your country and in your industry that might even make you sick. We have a new thing called the vomit factor, which is like if you're truly an entrepreneur, a lot of times you will be right there. And that you will want to be sick because it's so scary, but you keep going because you know that's going to make it happen. My purpose in life is to uplift humanity's consciousness by really, by supporting and empowering socially responsible businesses. And we're coming out of the closet. The world has changed completely. When I first started eradicating poverty and hunger in the movement in 1977, we had over 70,000 children dying every day. Today we have 17,000 still. And we're now looking at 20 years or 15 years from now to eradicate poverty because of you, because of what you do, because of renewables. So the biggest thing that I want to say is there's a big picture, but then there is you, beautiful, beautiful you, with your gifts and with you using all of this, because it's a combination of sound business principles and a beautiful consciousness that will create tremendous wealth for you and for the world. So that's what I see for the future.
So what's kind of interesting is there's a bit of a full circle thing happening, because I remember at the very beginning of Money New, you talk about Buckminster Fuller, and you obviously knew Bucky well, and his whole concept of Spaceship Earth and how we're all basically crew members, and the whole idea of the final exam, which is like, we've got this technology which already can solve all the world's problems, and it's just human consciousness that's not there yet. And we're like this year, last year, not everyone's aware of this, but we are actually at a tipping point as in right this moment where we have got over half of the countries of the world that have actually hit grid parity with solar power. So it's actually cheaper now to have solar and then to feed it into the grid than it is to actually use fossil fuels and gases, into the grid. And that's why so many banks are involved, because it's actually commercially, better than it is using fossil fuels now. And by next year, it's going to be like 90% of all of the states in the US. And so on the one hand, technology can solve all these challenges. However, if you take a place like Hawaii, which you know really well, Hawaii hit grid parity like a decade ago, because it's more difficult to get the oil there, so it's more expensive. So the solar was already a better solution. And they have people queuing to get the solar power, but the government's not letting it happen because there's quotas of how much they're allowed to let it happen, so they don't end up putting all of the oil companies out of business. And so you've got this crazy situation where the government and regulations are stopping humans from doing what humans want to do.
That's right.
And you're obviously going to the UN and looking at that. To what extent do you see it being where we can work around governments compared to having to work through them?
There's nothing else to do. Buckminster Fuller used to say that politicians are like people scrambling for deck chairs on the Titanic. I want you to get that one. Scrambling for deck chairs on the Titanic. It is you. I really want you to get this. It is all of us here, every person, the cameraman, everyone that can make the change. We have to bypass governments. And this is, I don't want to get into a Donald Trump conversation. I really don't. But you had his picture up there. I said, Roger, did you just do that? Or I think you had it there for a long, long time.
It's been there for a long time, yeah.
He's a partner of my old partner, Kiyosaki, so we're related, right? But I have to tell you, the reason that people are so coming out is because they're so tired of that. So you need to know that it doesn't matter what government you're in. I've been working in China for 16 years. My business partner is the world leading architect in solar, and he had to go around the government. And now they're coming around to him. Just in the last few years, he had to fight to pass the first green law in China. And so you're just going to have to work around it. We have to use our innovative minds. We have to use all these tools. We have to mastermind and work with each other, get together in Bali and talk it over, because we are the answer. Governments are not going to do it. That, if you understand anything about systems, in our Money and You program, we have 4 major masters that we learn from, and one of them is Edward Deming, the systems genius of the planet. And what happens is that you can't really change a system until you really begin to do it from inside, and then the system will break down. But in a beautiful place like New Zealand, don't let it go down too far, because you don't need to. You have everything. You could be the the wealthiest country on the planet because of all the natural resources. Singapore would kill to have a fourth of what you have. So you have so much wealth. And that is my new definition of wealth, which is to have access to networks, to cash, to money, to people, to expertise, to knowledge. That's truly the new definition of wealth. That's what all, even the way that you think. So you really need to tap into your own wealth, and you're so wealthy, all of us in this room, because we have each other. And that is what's going to create the change. Governments are not going to do it, then they kind of follow you. And there's almost like a rebellion that's happening around the world. And you used to be a very interesting country. I know a lot about you. I was married to a Kiwi, been here for many years. And one of the things that there is a rebellious streak here, but it kind of got squashed down again. And you got to go out fighting because it's your life and it's your children's life.
So let's talk about Donald Trump for a moment.
Thank you.
We're going to open this up for questions in a moment as well, but there's something kind of interesting about like what's happening in America, which I think has a bearing directly on what's happening in New Zealand. I was reading a book recently on Emperor Nero. So Emperor Nero was the last emperor of Rome before Rome fell. And he came into power largely because he was great at entertainment. So he really kind of like revived the Colosseums. Everyone could fight with each other. He was very combative himself. He was a builder, so he built a lot of like all the kind of things you see in Rome. He built that, and so everyone was excited about that. But they weren't so interested in any of the issues because they were already in overindulgence. So they were actually looking for more for entertainment and so on. He wasn't just a builder. He wasn't just someone who was into the entertainment side, but he was also someone who had many women. And I mean, the parallels between him and Donald Trump are just amazing. But what was most interesting was that he was simply a product of ancient Rome at that time, which was that ancient Rome was falling. And when it's falling, you end up with overregulation. You end up with everyone feeling trapped and ending up becoming defensive. And you end up with them basically putting someone in charge, which allows them to get distracted from actually solving any of the issues and instead to actually just get more entertained. And while that's happening, you've got other countries and cities and power centers around which simply are growing, and they're the ones that end up taking over. And living in a place like Singapore, similarly to here in New Zealand, it's the most nimble countries that have the ability to shift what they're doing and really take on, like I mentioned earlier, economies of speed instead of economies of scale, which actually end up becoming the most competitive in the world. And I believe that New Zealand will be one of the top 10 most competitive countries in the world in the next 5 to 10 years. And it won't be because of any government regulation or any large companies. It will be because more of the entrepreneurs who become entrepreneurs in New Zealand will choose to stay in New Zealand, knowing that they can actually access the entire world's market from here. I think Xero is a perfect example of that. But so many of the entrepreneurs that we know from the last couple of decades from New Zealand have actually left New Zealand. And so there's been this kind of mindset, that's what needs to happen. That's all shifting right now. And what's happening in America is a perfect opportunity for what's happening here in New Zealand. We are the largest growing entrepreneur network in the world, and we intentionally do not run any events in America. All of our events are running in Australasia, in Asia, in Africa, and in Europe. So be really aware that you're sitting right now on one of the greatest kind of like shifts and transfers of wealth in the history of man, and it's actually all coming your way, and it's for you to claim, which is what makes it so exciting. So with that being said, I'd love, now that we've heard a little bit from everyone here on the stage, for you to be the ones who ask the questions. So we're going to give you just a minute or two to turn to the person next to you and say, if you had a big question to ask, whether it's for one individual or a number of people here on the stage, what would be your big question? Who would you ask it to? Take a moment, turn to someone next to you, and come up with a question. Okay, all right, thank you. So we're going to just take a number of questions now. So who would like to ask a question? We have a hand right at the front here. So when you ask a question, you can stand up, say who you are, and then who you'd like to ask a question to, then ask the question, and we'll do our best to answer.
Right behind.
Right behind you.
Kia ora, my name is Ace. Questions, I think, well, for the panel, but probably directly to Roger yourself. Just about, I'm interested in how we might be able to tell when something's too big. Like we talked about, expediency and that gives us the ability to adapt, change, and grow. And so I think we're all kind of talking about growing, but when do we get to the point when there's too much growth, and how do we sort of start to manage that and identify that, obviously?
So because it's more about the panel, I won't answer that directly right now, but there are some thoughts and answers I'll have on that in terms of pace and speed tomorrow. But I'm going to throw that one over to Carla to just share what you would say is the time when someone knows they're growing too fast as well as too slow.
Half-baked opinion. Ready to go?
I have a quick one. You wake up screaming at 3 o'clock in the morning. Yeah.
Hello? Oh, there we go. So I think that there's probably different dimensions for growth. And I agree with you that if we just latch onto the label growth and then focus on commercial growth, we're going to make a lot of money, but we're going to run out of planet, right? So I wonder if there's another, or there are more dimensions for growth. And I just wonder if that's something to reflect on, is to go, okay, well, maybe this has sort of run its course here, but what can I learn from this, or what can we learn from this, or is there some other plane that we can take that growth mindset to?
I think that's a really great point, especially for those of you who are always overambitious to want to see things change. One of the biggest shifts is when you see the distinction between expanding and enhancing, because you can spend a lot of time like Richard Branson's a master at this. He won't just go constantly to focus at expanding. He'll know that if something's got a potential natural path that's right for the team, so it's not growing how you want to grow it, it's growing in a way that the team and your community actually are doing it naturally. Like there's that Zen saying, in nature nothing is rushed but all is accomplished. Everything finds its own natural course. So if he sees that everything's naturally growing the way it's meant to, which means you don't have to push it, he'll focus his time, instead of trying to expand it more, he'll focus on enhancing it, which is how do I improve the value within it. He'll go and fly his own airlines just to kind of see how he could do small little things to change it, as opposed to go buy another plane. And so, your ability to actually balance between, am I focusing at making something bigger and leveraging it, or am I focusing on making something more valuable and enhancing it, becomes a huge decision that you as a leader need to take, or else you'll always overexpand. And your team won't thank you for it, because they'll be the ones that fall over as well. We'll just keep them on, and we'll just roll them from there.
I was going to say, you gave us a really good clue this morning. If you've run out of cash, you've probably leveraged too much. And if you run out of time, you've given too much value. And I think I just wrote that down and thought, yep. I think that's a good clue.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I personally experienced that running out of time. It's not pleasant. It's amazing after you've been stagnant or sort of on a sort of a stable for a number of years, you get comfortable. And then when your sales suddenly double, it's like, shit, how am I going to cope with it? You start working the more hours, then that reaches a limit. You start coming up against these roadblocks in yourself. Other people start noticing you're grumpier than normal. And you're running out of sleep, and it's like, wow. And then all the things that you need to do to expand well all take extra time. And then you realize some of your thinking that's kept you where you are has to change. And that's part of what these change between the levels is all about. The thinking that gets you in one level keeps you there.
Keeps you there. It's like being in first gear and putting your foot down and saying, well, it's as fast as I can ever go, and someone passes you and you go, how did they do that? And it's just because they just took their foot off the pedal instead of continuing to put it on and change gears. So that whole changing gears thing of knowing that whatever's got you to where you are is actually what's stopping you from getting to the next level up, and you've got to take your foot off the pedal in order to even find that next level up, is one of the most challenging things for entrepreneurs, because we'd like to keep our winning formulas going even when they become losing formulas. And we'll go more into that this afternoon for sure.
And very quickly, you really need to prepare in our business school for entrepreneurs. One of the things we teach is for you to go for the biggest picture possible. So you think about building a company for 100 million, whatever it is, a billion, whatever it is that you do. And you literally prepare for that, even though it's a fantasy at first. But I am very metaphysical, but I'm very, very, very business-oriented and systems-oriented. And there are statistics that you can put in place that will tell you immediately when your stats begin to go down, 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 then you know that there's something that really needs to change. So literally, I'm sure there are some masters in this room. This is why you want to network and find out people that can really support you with systems. There's nothing by accident in businesses. There are ways for you to really just set it in place and for you to prepare for that. And then you have life happens. And even then you can prepare for that.
All right, let's take another question. We have a hand up right over there, a lady there.
It's on.
We on? Yep. So my question is exactly linked
So
to that.
your name?
Oh, my name is Lydia Laurie. Yep.
Hello.
So I'm a relationship mentor, and I've also worked with successfully with guys in prison for rehabilitation. But what I'm really interested in is how big you think. So my question was, when you first began, like when you were young, I'm assuming, how did you get your little thoughts or little dreams to grow into such huge, such big?
I was actually running this company at 29. I was a baby. By the way, prison rehabilitation, come see me, the master of masters, Dr. Sherry Clark. She will give you all the systems. She's retired, beautiful girl. Very quickly, I basically have the belief that we prepare for very, very big, what I just said, and then you go to work on how you're going to get there, and everything that you're learning here is completely in alignment with literally what I did, except I didn't have all these colors, I didn't have all these labels. It was another system, but very, very similar. So everything that you're learning here is exactly what you need. And then there is a whole other piece about trusting. In our Money and You program, we teach generalized principles, and there's physics terms for things like the ripple effects. And there is physics and scientific terms for when you are losing your mind, which is called perturbation, the theory of dissipative structures. So you need to know that life happens, but at the same time, you can prepare by planning, by preparing and looking and educating and having the eyes of futurists. And if you don't have it, you surround yourself with a team of people and masters that will teach you. That's what I did very, very young. I always have been in a mastermind since I was 27 years old, and always have had a mentor since I was 27 years old.
And one thing, by the way, is that there is a popular belief that I think the media also gets involved in, which is that, you know, people are born as big thinkers, or people are born, you know, to be entrepreneurs. You're never too old to think big. You know, if you get into, exactly as DC says, the right environment and within the right group, you'll think bigger. So I find myself thinking bigger all the time by surrounding myself with people who think bigger. And I know that's the same for everyone here as well. It's actually knowing it's not a one-time thing and then you go off. And similar, if you end up in a situation where everyone around you thinks small, you will think smaller as well, right? So you have to make sure you're surrounding yourself with the right people in order for you to continue to be able to see possibility and then to achieve it as well. We'll take another question from the front here. Here comes the microphone.
Hi, my name is Rachel Kelly. Hello, everyone. I'm a star. It's a terrible, terrible thing. I actually have a more holistic question for this panel, because it's a current issue I've seen in my own company, in my business. And I've been in California for the last 8.5 years in biotech space. And I've been involved with commercialization in New Zealand, taking businesses to the North American market and helping to cultivate their revenue from a global standpoint. And within this involvement with the commercialization space and the incubation space is we have a lot of entrepreneurs, and we have this amazing number 8 wide mentality. But the problem we have is New Zealand has this dairy coat. You know, our value is just in dairy and in that type of area. So we're in this chicken or the egg situation where we have amazing ideas and we have amazing things coming from this country, but we only have the reputation for dairy. So we're hitting this brick wall, I feel like, in these communications with even North America, and this chicken or the egg situation. So we've got great value, yes. We're not commercialising it well overseas. So how do we overcome the paradigm that the international market has for New Zealand, even though we have amazing ideas?
Christika, do you want to take that one, just from the point of view that this is exactly what happened in the learning development industry, as to whether you take that whole idea and go and try and import it into America, or whether you actually bring the best from the world and bring it to New Zealand. That whole process of what the goal is in the first place in terms of what you're doing with biotechnology.
So you're talking about the virtual reality, augmented reality partnerships?
Yeah, I mean, like, you took an approach, because we had a conversation about exactly this, which is like, well, given that I'm from New Zealand and I'm so far away from America, and in America you've got learning development that's grown so well and so on, how do we take what we're doing here and compete with that? And I said to you, don't compete, right? You've got something that they don't have, which is you're here in New Zealand. So take the very best that's out there and bring it in here, and then you're already going to be number one in New Zealand, right?
Yeah, that's right. So the interesting thing that we did with that is we'd been looking for a learning management system, for example. We've got sort of 3 or 4 partnerships now, and because the ones we saw in New Zealand weren't that great, we didn't think. So I looked for 18 months, and we finally found one and approached them, and so we've become a distributor for them. But they loved it because the time zone differences are just crazy. So we've just opened up a whole new market in Asia Pacific for them, because they couldn't be bothered sitting, well, they could, but they're up at 9, 10, 12 at night trying to have conversations with people in this area. And we did that 3 or 4 times with different partners. So that's just made us look, great, for not just here in New Zealand for our industry, but also it allowed us to go to London and win the Silver Award for an international startup, learning and development startup, from New Zealand. Like, we're the furthest away, and we got silver out of 460 entries. And that was just because we didn't recreate it ourselves. We just went and found the best, like you say, and brought those people in. So I don't know if that helps you.
It's changing your focus 100%. So you're not trying to make your money by trying to be someone in New Zealand without all the infrastructure America has, and then trying to compete with America. It's doing it the other way around. Grace Lai, who is in Australia, and she started with you, the same thing. She surgical assistant and wanted to get involved in biotechnology. She started by actually getting people to go out to Future Med in Los Angeles. As she was doing that, she was thinking, wait a minute, there's all these companies in America who'd love to be in Australia, so I'm going to take the best of that and I'm going to bring it into Australia. And she's now got a platform that supports all of the surgeons in Australia, where they can very easily be able to look after their customers, build their practice, all these things that they didn't have before as a platform. And as a result of that, now she's got this business that's booming, and it's all happening as a result of just looking at it the other way around and realizing when you travel, you time travel, right? When you go to America, you're going to the future. So go, not in all things, not in the culture, but in terms of technology, yes. So go to the future, get the best of the future, bring it back to New Zealand, and you're going to then have something that they don't have, which is the ability to dominate an entire country with like 4 to 5 million people, compared to trying to dominate in America, which is almost impossible to do, and you get there much faster. Australia is now the 5th largest tech hub in the world, and New Zealand is accelerating too. And it went there from 12th or 13th. And the reason for that is because you can list a company now in Australia for 1/10 of the value that it actually takes. You've got to be $600 million to be on NASDAQ. You can be 60 million, you're in Australia. And so you've got all these American companies now coming out to list in Australia. New Zealand is going to be the next step where that happens too, right? So just be really aware, you're in an amazing place where there's going to be more and more people coming here to test their technologies and to start new things up. And any companies in biotech that wants to test countrywide a particular new technology is going to find that New Zealand is one of the very best places they can do that already, right? So be that.
That's true. I almost feel like New Zealanders aren't particularly good at promoting themselves too. So we see this amazing growth in various sectors for New Zealand businesses, and even Australia, which I wish we would collaborate more with and not look at them so in such a bad way. But we don't really promote ourselves well. What we're doing, and it's a matter of...
Okay, can I just pause, because I'd love for one of the panelists to speak about this. You have a language at the moment which is not serving you. Because when you say, everyone looks at New Zealand and thinks it's dairy. When you say, we all look at Australia, I wish we would actually do more with Australia. When you say we, and you continue to talk about we as if you're including everyone in this room, when in fact most of us don't think that way. But as long as you think we think that way, you'll think that way.
Right.
But the moment you say, actually, I'm going to think differently, then you'll find other people that think differently too. And you'll find that you can't actually use any of those reasons as the reason that you're not actually able to move forward yourself, right?
That's true. My experience with the people that I have been working with have had that paradigm, and that includes government too.
Right.
So there's a very big glass ceiling with government and their ability to collaborate and connect and create a much greater biotech hub for this Australasia segment, and that's the barrier I've been seeing from a government standpoint.
Absolutely. So in the same way that don't go look for partners that don't already see your point of view, don't go look for customers who don't want to have your product, you'll find that there are others that actually already are thinking the way that you would like to think, and they're already busy getting on with it. And as long as you go look for those people and connect with them, that's going to make the difference. But I mean, DC, I'd love for you to just share that, because mindset, by the way, you would have noticed this morning is the number one thing that stops us at the moment. Languaging and what we decide to focus on. What would you share around that?
Well, we're the Bobbsey twins, because I was just going to share that. I was just going to say, we create our own reality. And I tell you right now, I have never met anyone that doesn't freaking love New Zealand. I mean, I am, my Facebook, and it's like, I wish I was there. Everybody loves New Zealand. New Zealand, Australia, and Canada are the darlings of the planet. And but you're correct in the sense that there's definitely needs to be, and you guys, all of you can do it, which is to get someone, and you can do it yourself and go and do a contract with the government here, where you're going to start putting New Zealand on the map. There are so many beautiful things here that you can be showing. And so that is something that as an entrepreneur, you want to see these things that need to be done and then come up with some idea and go pitch it to the right people and take the money behind it with people that have invested with you and get New Zealand on the map. That's one thing. And the other one was I was just going to volunteer. I'll have a table out there, and I know some really beautiful people. I live in San Diego, and that can actually support you with this.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Remember, we have a network.
Thank you.
Very
How
good,
can I
okay.
work with you directly?
Yeah. DC's going to be around, right? Because you got
I'll be here and tomorrow.
Absolutely. Awesome.
I'm a stalker.
Okay, we're down to our final two questions. We're going to take the gentleman there in the yellow.
Hi, my name's Steve Hockley. I had a question. Financial success obviously is a big part of business, but often it's not the major outcome, or often there's a really significant secondary. I just wondered from the panel and as in large, what was their biggest sort of secondary success, if you want, that they've taken out of their entrepreneurial trip?
I think you've got to enjoy what you're doing, and you've got to be passionate about what you're doing, and you'll have a good feeling because of that, right? And so you have a lot more fun. So it's about being in flow, really, isn't it? I'm talking about being in flow. So I think that's the most important thing, more important than money or anything else, is that feeling that, hey, what we're doing is really good, we're doing the right thing, and it's working, and it's a buzz.
For me, it was actually the development of my thinking. And when Roger talks about the wealth spectrum, and it was something you said at an event recently that I didn't actually get previously, and I've been around this stuff for quite a long time, was that it's actually about, as you go up the spectrum, it's actually about your consciousness levels, and it's just, that has been amazing, and it's made an impact in every part of my life.
Very cool.
Yeah. And similar to do with those changing gears. To me, it's reaching a limit in and getting really frustrated with why some things weren't happening, and then suddenly being, say, in the business and seeing how it gets solved on some of the money side, then thinking, those same principles could happen elsewhere in life. So just that ability to think, change gear.
Very good. We'll take another question, and then anything else you wanted to add, we can do that too. Take a question from the gentleman right there. On the next.
Thank you. My name's Stephen Parr. My question to DC is, can I do a video testimonial for you while you're here? Because, Roger, you're right, it's never too late to learn. This time next year I'll be 70, and I've come here today to leapfrog my next career, which all is because of DC and Robert Kiyosaki, who did a course in New Zealand in 1987, 88. And since that course, I doubled my income, and again, and I've gone from red, orange, yellow, green, I think I'm now a blue, And so my next career is as a financial educator based on my books, Take Charge of Your Money Now and The Aspiring Millionaire. So thank you.
Wow. I did not plant him. Thank you. Thank you. We have over 100,000 graduates from over 65 countries, and when you go to moneyandyou.com, you will see many notable grads, like, of course, right here, Roger, that have attended the program. But the biggest thing has been them putting all of these principles to work in their lives, and that's what will do it. I will do whatever testimony you like. Thank you.
And just congratulations to you as well. Yes. Just being at that point where you know you're at the very beginning of a new career, that's just awesome as well. I think we should give him a big round of applause too. Yeah. Awesome. All right. So we're gonna give everyone up here just a chance to just share one thing. Just what would be one final takeaway, because they've just been awesome. Haven't they been great over the last hour? Just having this time together. Let's just give everyone a chance to share what would be one takeaway you'd like to leave with everyone. Let's start with, we'll come right from the end, we'll come around this way. So we'll start with Colart and then come over to Beryl.
Okay, my one thing would be an old African proverb, and it goes like this. In the desert, if you want to go fast, you go alone. If you want to go far, you go together. It's one of my favorite ideas.
Yeah.
I think mine would be open. I'm naturally risk adverse, funny that. And I think that Rustika is gradually dragging me up the spectrum. And I'm screaming all the way.
She does, and at each other. For me, before I started Bloom, I had tried many things, and none of them had worked. And it wasn't until I actually started to apply this content, so in particular the understanding my profile and what my profile should do. And I remember in the first year of mentoring with Roger, he said, you know, after 8 months, you've made no money, just stop trying to create products and create a vibrant community. And I thought, oh, I get it now. And as soon as I did that, that's when Bloom took off. And there's just so, even though on the surface it looks easy to understand, like that's why people can say, why do you keep coming back? Why do you keep coming back? Because every time there's more to learn. So I think if you really do understand your profile and the wealth spectrum, that's two really great places to start, because as I say, it's the only thing that actually made me successful in business. And of course, with my wings here.
And for me, being prepared to unlearn some things and then be open to learning new ones. Because, yeah, when you get comfortable, it's hard to change, but unless you're prepared to make those moves, then yeah, you can't grow to the next level. And we all want that.
It's just allow yourself to monetize your dreams and your life purpose with all of these systems. And I just want to share with you that you are my leverage. My purpose, my mission is to transform educational systems around the world and eradicate poverty and hunger. I want to be able to retire and hang out on Maui and beautiful exotic places like New Zealand, but I can't do that until we stop hunger on the planet. So I want to ask you to please put all these principles to work, all these things that you're learning, allow yourself to become as wealthy as you would like, and share the wealth by allowing other people to have equality, to have enough food, to have enough shelter. And I promise you that you will be so much happier than you are today. So thank you for doing that. Please do that. Not for me, but for yourself and for the world. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And I want to say a big thank you to each of our changemakers up here as well. This gives a texture to everything we're talking about. It's what happens when we start really just applying this. And just for each of you, thank you so much for being here and giving it your time and all of your talent, intellect, energy, and good vibes to everyone here as well. So can we please give them all a really big round of applause? Thank you, guys. Thank you.